Hello, my name is Anchen and I am a member of the Stronghold Church down in Weaver. And this is my turn to do my testimony, and I'm really excited about sharing it with you and just reflecting, on the goodness of God in my life in a way that I can share. It has been challenging. I'm sure anyone that has done their testimony can relate to that, but it's also such an opportunity, and I'm just grateful for that, to be able to do that. My story is really a story of God's redemptive love and His grace and His goodness, and I think when we take time out and we really look at all the things, how God's put our picture together, we can't help to but realize that our story starts so much earlier than when we get saved. That God was kind of in the details long before we realized, and I'm starting to see that now. And I was writing a bit of a timeline for something different, and I realized even when I was in the womb, my mom was about 5 or 6 months pregnant with me, and she had severe heart complications, and they had to rush her to the doctors. And the first doctor told her that at the end of the day there's no way that she would be able to carry the pregnancy full term, and it will endanger her life. And my dad tells the story of how he was standing outside of the hospital, and he's standing there, and he's barefoot. He didn't have shoes on. My dad's like what you call a plasjobbing. Some people will not know what that means, but anyway. And but he was standing outside, and it started snowing. It was so cold that year in Bloemfontein, and it's not normal to snow in South Africa. It does snow from time to time in places, but it was snowing, and he said he was smoking a Texan cigarette, and he just shot up a prayer to God and said, please just intervene. And he came back, and they did, and there was another specialist that was in the hospital at that time that was a heart specialist, and he was able to perform surgery on my mom, and she didn't lose the pregnancy. And he also came back a few months later when I was born to also see that through. And even though I was apparently born blue because of, obviously it was I think to myself it could very easily have been that I would have had severe complications in my life, but I haven't. And I think that is the miraculous goodness of God, of just being there and intervening in that situation. And I'm so grateful to have parents that did that for me, that was willing to fight for me, that was willing to just not give up. It's really good to know that. It's really good to know that you have parents that care about you, that love you, and that fought for me. And I just want to honor them in that, because I know that it's not always easy to make decisions when things look as bad as that. But they, my dad, there's always been some direct line of faith in our family that's I think generationally just straight through, and I'm so grateful for that. And I grew up on a farm as well, which was amazing because we had loads of animals, and I love animals, and I had lots of space to explore, had lots of independence in a way, I guess, because wasn't as restricted as children are today, because I could explore and make mistakes and run around and not care about stuff that don't matter. And I also had the real honor and privilege of being exposed to many different cultures and background because of that. And my friends were all different to me, but I didn't know it. My gogos, that's what we call the South African African grandmas. I had many gogos as well, that looked after me, and I knew nothing different. I knew a culture of people being different to each other, but people loving each other and it was just sharing the land and looking after each other. It was a very different experience. Did not understand or know the turbulence that the country was going through. I was a child and I was very sheltered from that. I do remember, however, my dad at some point pulling me aside. I think I was around 8, and he explained racism to me, because he was very anti-apartheid, and he was very anti-racism, and he loved people, and he honored people in a way that I still today, I look at that and I can only respect him for it, because it wasn't easy for them, politically. It was like, and it was also, a lot of the very, very religious churches, was the spirit that drove racism, and that's not a reflection of who God is at all. But I knew that from a young age, and I understood that was not the way forward, and I'm so grateful for that today. I also look back, and I had to, I have to tell you, not all the bad stuff, fortunately, but I did have trauma as a child as well. And it was, something that happened to me that was really hard. And it was unfortunately back in the day when, we didn't deal with trauma. We didn't deal with things the way that we deal with them today, because we simply didn't have the tools. I think we take for granted how much tools we have available today to deal with the wrong in the world, to deal with trauma, and to actually help people process that and actually not be crippled by it for life. And I think we take it for granted. But having said that, I went through, life having kind of being emotionally and crippled in a way because of the trauma that I experienced, and because I was unable to really articulate very well what has happened. I was not able to process it very well, and it did unfortunately, affect me in ways that, for instance, I was unable to do or say anything public. I was incredibly shy. I was incredibly, I remember writing a speech for school and actually winning, like a first prize, and then I had to deliver this speech in front of, a whole school of people, and I just flaked out. It was just impossible. And it was a speech about, if we don't look after our planet, we're basically committing suicide. It was weird, because that was years and years before we actually had, started to realize what we're doing to our planet. But besides that, I was unable to articulate well. And I think, the older I get, the more I realize that because of that, trying to stay out of, any kind of situation where you would be, put forward for anything. But if you start believing that you're not worthy of that, if you start subconsciously, being shy, you start partnering with quite self-sabotaging ways of doing things, and it can be, quite you're not always aware you're doing it. Now that we know a lot more about how trauma affects people, we can deal with it better. But I was not equipped to deal with that in my lifetime, and it really made me make more and more bad choices and believe more and more lies. And I look back at that, and it was a moment where it steered me away from actually really becoming and being the person that I believe that God was, always had for me and meant for me. And it got really destructive by the time I was a young adult and I was at university. I was in really bad, destructive, self-sabotaging habits, to the point where I was unable to really, engage with life the way that, we should, in any way, shape or form. And I hid it very well. I hid my pain, and the pain grew and grew, and I was always what I remember was being extremely lonely, because deep down inside of me there was this wound, and this pain, and I without realizing, partnered with it in many ways, and because of that I made decisions that was not good decisions, because you lose sight of what is good and right when you are in a lot of pain and it's not processed. And long story short, by the time I was in my mid-20s, I was not living a very good life, in spite of pretending that I'm fine. I was really hard, in many ways in my heart. I was very anti-church, anti-religion, anti anyone that had any kind of anything to do with God. I actually think that I came to a point in my life where I was just thinking, well, I don't know if God exists, but I don't know. When I look at churches and I look at religion, and I'm like, I don't belong there. And if he does exist, he can't possibly be in there, because religion is a hard place, and I don't think it reflects God's heart for us. And it's unfortunately, a lot of us associate that with God, and it's a shame, because it's not really true. But I remember in my university days that I had a flatmate, a roommate, and she was on the Christian outreach program at university, and she got me for a roommate. So got her work cut out for her. But she was different to anyone that I've ever met. She never Bible bashed me, and she never tried to get me to go to church or see it her way, or get into a debate with me about things, because she just didn't. She was just really nice to me and real, and it was weird. I didn't expect that, really, if I'm honest. But I do remember moving out eventually, because I was really looking to be on my own, and I didn't want to really be around people so much. I wanted my own space, because I just, I didn't want people to really see behind closed doors, that I was not okay, really, I guess. And it was during this time that it was a really messy time, but it was during this time that I started doing an art class, and it was my first art class that I've done. And I one night was just sitting in my bedroom, and I started painting, and I just remember this presence, and it was just different. It was like this warm light all around me, and I remember drawing, and out of this drawing I just saw this face, this woman's face, and I started drawing it. It was like she was looking up, and I could just see the face forming on the canvas, and I was drawing, and it was like an experience that was different to anything else. It was just different, and I look back now and I realized that I was experiencing God. I was experiencing his presence in that room, and that was different to anything else that I've ever experienced. That peace was different. And I look back and I realized probably someone was praying or interceding for me somewhere, and standing in the gap, and really partnering their heart with what God sees in my life, and not, disqualifying me because of all, the junk around my life, because I think that's who God really is that he breaks through those places of, what we think and see, and he sees the heart. And that was God just partnering with me that evening and just encountering him. And I didn't realize I was encountering God that evening. I didn't realize that. I knew it was different. I remember it as being different, but I didn't know what I was encountering, and that I was encountering the Holy Spirit. And I look back at it, and I start seeing, he was in places where he was trying to reach out to me, and encountering me and loving me in ways that was, beyond what I was expecting to happen. And I think it has a lot to do, with God starts knocking on the door long before we hear him before we see him. And he knows what he's placed in our hearts. He knows what he's made us for. He knows what he has done for us, and that he's able to redeem us. And I think he was starting to answer questions in my heart that I didn't even know I was asking it. That's the only way I can explain it, because I never throughout my school was I able to take art classes, and it was never available. But yet something very profound was happening in this creative setting, and I was starting to experience God. I did not come to Jesus at this point. It was even a few years later down the line, and I remember I started living in Pretoria, and I also met this friend, Melody, which was a Christian. Again, ended up living with her. We lived in a same house, and she was also not a Bible bashing Christian. She was a very nice person, and she was quite normal, and had real life situations, but she knew God, and she would pray for me and not Bible bash me and try to argue with me about God or anything. She was just there, and she was just present, and she was just praying for me. And I think that's kind of what happened. Is I just I was really not someone that you would approach, but something was happening in me where I was starting to feel like I had this conversation with a friend of mine. I was like looking up at the stars, and I thought to myself, this can't be random. this can't. It's just, even though it can't be random. There must be more. And then, life went on, and I was still, engaging in quite destructive behavior and all this. But, God was kind of starting to make a way. And I had this other friend that one day I just got to this place where I just couldn't go to work anymore. I just got to the place where the depression and the isolation and the self-destructive behaviors that I was doing, it just got too much. And I was like at that place where I was like, oh fine, I'm just, enough is enough, I can't do it anymore. And I just crashed, I guess, and I broke down, and I was just kind of at that point where I was like, I don't know what to do, I don't know what life is about, but I just can't do any of it anymore. I got really depressed, and this friend came around my house, and she's going to go see this pastor. He's really nice, I should come and have him pray for me. And I strangely sat there, thought, well, I don't have anything else to do, so I'm fine. And I went. And he was talking, and I know there was a lot of talking, and it was nice, but I can't really tell you what he was talking about because I don't remember anything except that at some point he was looking at me and he said to me, all of this at the end of the day, until you actually believe in your heart that Jesus is the Son of God and you confess it with your mouth, it's like that's when you become something in your spirit. You have this newness that comes. You have what we call born again. But for anyone that's listening that's not a Christian, it's like that's when you in your spirit connect with God's spirit, and your spirit becomes alive, and it's not just lost, and it's not just pieces anymore. It's like something happens. And I sat there, and it's like, I thought to myself, I don't know why, but I do believe Jesus is the Son of God. And I was like, yeah, I do. I want to do it. And it was like something in me just responded. And I have spent a lifetime in religion, and I've spent classes and done philosophy and all that. And I thought to myself, it doesn't make any sense, God and religion. And it's all I've experienced. It makes no sense. I don't want any of it. I was quite happy without it. But in that moment there was something different that happened to me. It was supernatural, and it was like a gift of faith. And I always look back, and I gave my life to Jesus that night, and I did the prayer, and they prayed for me, and something lifted, and something was different. And I was like, I don't know what that is yet. I don't know how to figure it out. But even the faith in that moment that I got saved with was more about him giving it to me. It was like a supernatural thing. It wasn't something that was just out of my head or out of my mind, or there was like a spiritual thing that happened. And it was about 2 or 3 weeks later, I started going to the small groups. I wasn't quite ready for church yet. I was not church material, and I'm not really church material. If you get to know me, I'm not church material according to churchly standards, but I do really believe in the goodness of God, and I believe that's for every person. But anyway, I was due to go to church that Sunday, but we had all of our friends had this weekend booked away in the bushveld, and it was amazing. And it was like, yeah, I thought, oh God, go to church another time, you know. And I went, and I was there the Friday night and the Saturday night. And I remember standing there looking at the fire thinking, I should not be here. I need to be in the church tomorrow, because there is this desire in me to be there. There is this need, and all of these things that I found interesting, all this way of living and partying, and it's just all, I just looked at it and it just seemed and felt empty compared to the presence that I have experienced, the presence of God. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get back. I'm not there with my own car. But there was this pastor from another church that was in this group of friends. Yes, a pastor. And he got called back because he had to stand in for someone else the next morning. And 12 o'clock on a Saturday night, it's like he has to drive back in the middle of the night. And I was like, I'm getting in the car. I'm coming. And I got in the car. And then the car broke down. And then I got home in the mid-mornings, and my gate we have electricity problems in South Africa, but I had an electric gate and it wouldn't open. I had no electricity at my house. Couldn't charge my Nokia phone, which is my alarm. I couldn't do it. Was just, it was back in the day, so you were still quite dependent on your phone waking you up, and electricity is important. But anyway, I was like, I remember going to bed and saying, God, if this is you, if you want me in church tomorrow morning, you're going to have to wake me up, because I am not a morning person. This is hard. I am, been, away for the weekend, and I was not in good shape. And I remember waking up at 8 o'clock the next morning, and I was like, oh my word, this must be God. And I was like pulling the covers over my head. I'm like, oh, I can't, I'm too tired. And I just had this desire and this conviction in me that I had to go to church. And I finally got up, and I remember putting, the jeans on from the weekend, and it's like, I walked into church kind of a mess. I walked in through the doors, and I remember walking in and feeling so out of place. I remember walking in and looking at everyone and thinking, I should not be in here. I don't belong in here. Everyone is going to know that I don't belong in here. And I remember feeling like I can't breathe. I remember feeling this tightness come over me. And I remember standing in the church looking at the people around me, and it was the first time that I was in a church that was spirit-led. It wasn't religious, and everyone was so happy. Everyone was so happy, and I was standing there thinking, I don't do happy. I don't belong here. This is just insane. Everyone is happy, and I'm like feeling so uncomfortable. And then finally, I just looked at it, and I was like, I really started feeling quite anxious being in that environment. I was like, oh my word, it was like panic attack coming on. And then the next minute, I was just standing at the ground, and then this beautiful song started playing. Oh, I remember I couldn't listen to the music either. I was like, oh my word, I can't be in here. It's like, I was just so uncomfortable. And then the next minute, the music started playing, and I heard the words, crucified and crushed like a rose, and he thought of me above it all. And those words just came into my spirit, and the music started sounding like it was from heaven. It was just, and I started experiencing these waves of something, just this warm flowing waves just coming over me and over me and over me. And I felt like something just broke off me. It's like something that I thought was part of me broke off me, and all of a sudden I just experienced this peace of God, this presence, this anointing, this feeling of wholeness. And I just started crying. I cried the whole service. It was very undignified. And at the end, you know, they do the altar call, and I wasn't going to the front, but someone came and just said, why don't you come for prayer? And I was like, all right. And I went up, and then the pastor started praying for me about something specific that's happened in my life that no one knew about. No one. And I knew God sees me. I was like, oh my word, this is real. This isn't just a feeling. This isn't about, you know, religion. This isn't about any of that. This is real. The God that sees is real, and he's not, you know, condemned me. He's not pushed me away. He's just been amazing to me. He's loved me through all of this. He's wanted me through all of this. He's made a way to connect with me. And I, you know, since that moment, I have had him in my life where I've just experienced life in a different way. I've gone through stuff, yes. You walk with God, you have the goodness of God and everything, but you know, you're still on this planet, you still go through real stuff. But my experience of after that encounter with him has been very different, even though I have, you know, gone and made mistakes, or he's always pulled me back into that place of love. And it's always been a place of love, a place of restoration, a place of understanding. It's always been a relationship with God that has never pushed me away or condemned me, or that's such a lie about who he is. It's always been about the goodness. He's always given me breakthrough, you know, whether I got it right or whether I got it wrong. It's like he's just always kind of persevered and giving me a good outcome in my life. And it's been an amazing journey. I have a wonderful husband, and I have wonderful children. And I've throughout this time and this season, I've had the opportunity to work in non-profits and bring, you know, and be involved in restoration, especially for women, and, you know, seeing God move in those situations, seeing him use, we just come to the part. If we just show up, he will do stuff. You know, if we just lay stuff down and show up, he's gonna show up, and he'll use whatever, you know, we put in front of him. You know, it's like, for me, it's been using creativity ever since, you know, and finding ways to use creativity to reach out to people so that they can encounter him in a way that isn't a place in an environment of judgment, that isn't a place of, you know, feeling disqualified, or just, you know, encountering his spirit and encountering him and his love, because it will change your life. It does. It has changed my life. He has changed my life. He has put me back on the original path of what he wanted for my life. He has restored, he has redeemed, and he has been good to me. And it is not about church and religion, and church is important to me. I go to church because that's where God's chosen to manifest his true nature. But what I'm trying to say, it's not about, you know, religion. It's not about trying to encounter God through a spirit of trying to be good enough, or trying to, you know, pretend that I don't need him. It's about really encountering his love and his goodness and his restoration plan for our lives, to bring us back into that place of, you know, moving forward in what he has for us. In a nutshell, that's my story. Thank you for listening. God bless you. And just remember that he's real, and he will never give up on you, and he is pursuing your heart, and he's putting good things in your future so that you can have good outcomes. And he really just never gives up on us. And thank you for listening.